The moment I saw the camphor wood chest tucked away in the dusty corner of the antique shop, I knew it was the one. It wasn't ostentatious, not dripping with gilt or excessive carving, but it had a quiet dignity. The wood glowed with a warm, deep patina, hinting at journeys taken, secrets held. Bianca had been asking for something like this, something with history, something with secrets, she'd said with a wistful smile that lately seemed harder to coax out. She wanted a piece for the foot of our bed, something to hold linens, or perhaps just the weight of unspoken things. I pictured her delight, the way her eyes would light up, and paid the shop owner perhaps a little more than I should have. Getting it home wasn't easy. It was solid, heavier than it looked. I set it up in my workshop, the familiar scent of wood oils, drying paper, and old leather filling the air. My work restoring antique maps requires patience, a steady hand, and an eye for minute detail, skills I find soothing. I decided the chest deserved the same care before I presented it to Bianca. It needed a gentle cleaning, the brass hinges polished, perhaps a touch of wax to revive the luster. I started with the interior, the scent of camphor sharp and clean, designed to protect precious fabrics from moths and time. The lining, a faded damask silk, was mostly intact, but along the inside of the lid, one edge had come loose. Probably just age, I thought, reaching for my tools. A little adhesive, carefully applied, would secure it. As I gently lifted the loose flap of silk to get a better look, my fingers brushed against something solid beneath. Not the wood of the lid itself, but a thin, precisely fitted panel. Curiosity, the restorer's constant companion, took over. I ran my fingers along the edge, feeling for a catch, a seam. There, almost invisible, was a tiny indentation. Pressing it gently, I heard a faint click. The panel sprang open a fraction of an inch. It wasn't part of the original construction, I realized. It was a modification, skillfully done, a hidden compartment, a secret just as Bianca had wanted. My heart gave an odd little jump, a flicker of excitement, mixed with something else. Trepidation. It felt almost too perfect, discovering a hidden space within the very object meant to hold secrets. Inside, nestled against the dark wood, lay a small bundle of letters. Not old, brittle pages yellowed with age, but crisp, modern envelopes. They were tied together neatly with a simple black ribbon. My breath caught. The top envelope was addressed simply, starkly, in a bold, unfamiliar hand. Bianca, my Bianca. A chill snaked down my spine, cold and unwelcome, in the warm afternoon light of the workshop. These weren't historical curiosities. These were recent. I picked up the bundle. The paper felt expensive, thick beneath my fingertips. The return addresses were missing, deliberately omitted. The postmarks, however, were clear, dating back over the last 6 months. Dates that coincided with late nights she supposedly spent at the office, conferences out of town, that weekend visit to her sister she'd said was so needed. My hands started to tremble. I shouldn't read them. It felt like a violation, a crossing of a line from which there might be no return. But the letters were here, in a chest I bought for her, hidden, addressed to her. The need to know, sharp and sickening, clawed its way up my throat, tasting like bile. Untying the ribbon felt like unraveling the threads of my own life. I pulled out the top letter. The handwriting was confident, looping, masculine. "My dearest B," it began. I scanned the first few lines, my vision blurring, the words swimming before me. Intimate words. Words of passion, of shared moments, of longing. Words that spoke of clandestine meetings, of shared laughter in hotel rooms, of the thrill of secrecy. My stomach clenched. Nausea rose in a dizzying wave. I leaned against my workbench, the solid wood cool against my suddenly damp forehead. One phrase leaped out, searing itself into my brain. After your call last Tuesday, hearing your voice tell them you were working late again, pure torture knowing where you really were. Last Tuesday. I remembered last Tuesday. Bianca had called, sounding tired, apologetic. Another deadline, she'd murmured. The project was demanding everything. I'd told her not to worry, to take care of herself. I'd eaten dinner alone, watching some mindless show on television, waiting up until she finally came home near midnight, offering a perfunctory kiss before heading straight to bed, claiming exhaustion. The letter detailed a different Tuesday. A Tuesday spent not at her brightly lit office, but in a dimly lit bar, followed by hours in a room I didn't want to imagine. Each word was a hammer blow, shattering the foundation I thought our life was built on. The writer signed off simply as R. R. Who was R? The name meant nothing to me, yet this stranger knew my wife with an intimacy that stole the air from my lungs. Shock gave way to a dull, heavy dread settling deep in my gut. Then came the anger, cold and sharp, slicing through the numbness. How could she? How could she lie to my face, day after day, weaving this tapestry of deceit while living under my roof, sleeping in my bed? Missed signs flickered through my memory like faulty wiring, her sudden guardedness with her phone, the vague explanations for her absences, the slight emotional distance I had attributed to stress, to the natural ebbs and flows of a long marriage. I had been a fool, a trusting, oblivious fool. My first instinct was to storm into the house, throw the letters at her feet, demand answers, unleash the torrent of hurt and rage boiling inside me. But something held me back. My training, perhaps, the map restorer in me. Before fixing something damaged, you must first understand the full extent of the damage, trace the lines, comprehend the materials, assess the stability of the whole. A confrontation now would be raw, explosive, unpredictable. It would likely end in more lies, denials, frantic justifications. No, I needed more. I needed to know everything. Who was R? How long had this truly been going on? How deep did the deception run? My methodical nature, usually a source of calm precision, now felt like a cold, necessary shield. I took a deep, shuddering breath, forcing down the nausea. With hands that still shook slightly, I carefully refolded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into the middle of the bundle. I retied the black ribbon, making the knot exactly as it had been. My fingers, accustomed to delicate work, moved with automatic precision. I placed the bundle back into the hidden compartment. It rested there, silent, heavy with betrayal. I pushed the panel shut, the tiny click echoing unnaturally loud in the quiet workshop. Then I carefully smoothed the damask lining back into place, applying a thin, invisible line of adhesive along the edge. To the casual eye, it would look undisturbed. The secret was hidden once more, but now I was its keeper too. Walking back into the house felt like entering a foreign country. The familiar scent of dinner cooking, Bianca was making pasta, her favorite comfort food, seemed incongruous, mocking. She was humming in the kitchen, the sound jarringly normal. "Hey!" she called out, turning from the stove with a smile. It looked genuine, warm, or maybe it was just well practiced. "Bad day in the workshop? You look pale." "Just tired," I managed, forcing my lips into a semblance of a smile. Long day. Dinner was an exercise in strained normalcy. I listened to her talk about her day, the real one or the fabricated one, nodding, asking questions, playing the part of the attentive husband. Every word, every gesture, every glance felt loaded, suspect. I watched the way she ate, the way she sipped her wine, searching for cracks in the facade. She seemed relaxed, unaware. Or was that part of the act, too? Halfway through the meal, her phone buzzed on the counter beside her. A text message. I saw the way her eyes darted towards it, a quick, almost imperceptible flicker of tension before she casually glanced down, typed a swift reply, and set it face down again. Who was that? R? My jaw tightened, but I kept my expression neutral, commenting on the pasta instead. Later, curled up on the sofa, pretending to read while she watched a movie, the silence between us felt different. It wasn't companionable. It was charged, heavy with everything I now knew, and she thought I didn't. The betrayal sat between us, a tangible presence. Lying in bed that night, the space between us felt like a chasm. Bianca slept soundly, or seemed to, her breathing even, undisturbed. I lay awake, staring into the darkness. The image of those letters burned into my mind. The anger had cooled into a hard, cold resolve. Confrontation wasn't the answer, not yet. Knowledge was. I needed proof, context, the full picture. Her phone, her laptop, her emails, the trail of digital breadcrumbs she must have left behind. That's where I would start. I needed to know who R was, understand the scope of this lie, before I decided what to do with the wreckage of our marriage. My methodical mind began plotting, mapping out the investigation like one of my ancient charts, searching for the hidden contours of her betrayal. The search for truth had begun, quietly, in the dead of night, right beside the woman who had shattered it. The next morning felt brittle, like thin ice stretched over dark water. Sunlight streamed through the bedroom window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, oblivious to the wreckage beneath the surface of our lives. Bianca stretched beside me, yawning, a picture of domestic innocence. "Morning," she mumbled, voice thick with sleep, reaching out to brush a stray strand of hair from my forehead. Her touch felt like a spark against my skin, unwelcome, alien. I forced a smile, murmuring a reply, my insides twisting into knots. Breakfast was a repeat of the night before. Forced conversation, hollow smiles. I watched her pour coffee, butter toast, talk about a meeting she had scheduled for later that day. Was the meeting real? Was any of it real? The urge to grab her, shake her, demand the truth was a physical ache in my chest, but I pushed it down, clinging to my resolve. Patience, observation, understanding the terrain before acting. My opportunity came sooner than I expected. Bianca was running late for her supposed meeting. In her rush, gathering her bag and keys, she left her personal laptop open on the kitchen island, logged into her email. She called out a hasty goodbye, the front door clicked shut, and silence descended. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The digital door left ajar. I hesitated for only a second, the wrongness of invading her privacy warring with the desperate need to know. The letters in the chest had already shattered any illusion of sanctity. I walked over to the island, my reflection staring back from the glossy screen, a man I barely recognized, pale and grim. Her email inbox looked ordinary at first glance. Work messages, promotional junk, newsletters. But my eyes scanned for names, for anything that resonated with the R from the letters. Nothing jumped out immediately. I opened her messaging app, synced to her phone. My breath hitched. There, nestled amongst chats with friends and family, was a conversation thread simply labeled R. My fingers trembled as I clicked on it. The sheer volume of messages was overwhelming, stretching back months, possibly longer. I started scrolling upwards, reading fragments, piecing together the narrative of their secret life. Logistics for meetups disguised as work commitments, inside jokes I didn't understand, shared photos, innocuous landscapes at first, then selfies of the two of them, smiling, intimate. He was handsome, conventionally so, with the easy confidence of someone used to getting what he wants. Seeing his face felt like another blow, giving concrete form to the betrayal. Worse than the logistics were the exchanges themselves, the affectionate nicknames, the declarations of love, bolder and more explicit than anything in the letters. The casual way they discussed deceiving me, complaining about my schedule, my habits, painting me as an obstacle, an inconvenience in the grand drama of their affair. They mocked my predictability, my quiet nature. They talked about the future, a future that clearly didn't include me, involving plans to eventually break the news once certain arrangements were made. Financial arrangements. The cold dread returned, sharper this time. I scrolled through images saved in a hidden folder within her cloud storage, accessed through a link in one of their messages. Pictures from trips Bianca had claimed were solo work retreats or visits to her sister. Her laughing on a beach I didn't recognize, R's arm slung possessively around her shoulder, her raising a champagne flute in a hotel room, R's reflection caught in the mirror behind her. Each photo was a fresh stab, twisting the knife of betrayal deeper. The dates matched the letters, matched her lies, weaving a sickeningly complete picture. The meticulous restorer in me took over again, suppressing the rising tide of emotion. I started taking notes, documenting dates, locations, names mentioned, cross-referencing with the letters hidden in the chest. The affair wasn't just 6 months old. The digital trail suggested closer to 2 years. 2 years of lies, whispered calls, stolen weekends, feigned affection. 2 years of my life, built on a foundation of absolute deceit. The anger I'd felt initially had morphed into something colder, heavier, a profound sense of disillusionment. The woman I thought I knew, the woman I had loved and built a life with, didn't exist. She was a phantom, replaced by this calculating stranger revealed on the screen before me. The warmth I'd once felt for her had curdled into a strange mix of pity and contempt. I spent hours hunched over the laptop, the workshop forgotten, the maps waiting. The sun crawled across the sky, the initial adrenaline fading into a bone-deep weariness. I found evidence of financial transactions, small transfers to an account I didn't recognize, labeled vaguely as personal expenses or gifts. Not large amounts, not yet, but a pattern. The arrangements they'd mentioned took on a more sinister meaning. Finally, I logged out of everything, carefully closing the laptop, leaving it exactly as she had. I wiped the trackpad clean, erasing any physical trace of my intrusion. The house felt unnervingly silent, the weight of my discoveries pressing down on me. I walked back towards the bedroom, the camphor wood chest standing innocently at the foot of the bed. Its secrets were mine now, laid bare not by time, but by betrayal. Bianca came home late, as I expected she might, offering a plausible story about traffic and a meeting running over. I listened, nodded, the words washing over me without impact. We went through the motions of the evening, the facade thinner now, almost translucent. Later, lying in the dark once more, I watched her sleep. Her face, relaxed and unguarded, looked achingly familiar, yet utterly alien. The faint scent of her perfume, the one I used to find comforting, now seemed cloying, false. There was no rage left, no consuming grief, just a vast, cold emptiness. I knew, with chilling certainty, exactly who I was lying next to. She was a stranger, wrapped in the skin of my wife. The life we had shared was an elaborate restoration project based on a forgery, and I finally understood the full extent of the damage. My hand rested on the cool wood of the bedside table. The decision was made, not in anger, but in clarity. It was time to start carefully taking things apart. The days following my discovery took on a strange bifurcated quality. On the surface, life continued. I went to my workshop, meticulously restoring fragile coastlines on centuries-old maps, my hand steady, my focus absolute. This work, once a source of quiet joy, now felt like the only solid ground beneath my feet. Paper didn't lie. Ink didn't betray. The lines drawn by long-dead cartographers were honest in their intentions, even if flawed in their accuracy. Beneath the surface, however, another kind of mapping was taking place. During quiet hours, using a burner phone and a library computer, I researched divorce attorneys. I read reviews, looked for names that specialized in complex financial situations, noting down a few possibilities on a slip of paper I kept hidden within an old atlas in my shop. I started meticulously documenting our shared assets, cross-referencing bank statements with the small, suspicious transfers Bianca had made. The amounts weren't huge individually, but the pattern was undeniable, a slow bleed I hadn't noticed until I knew to look for it. Were these transfers to R, or part of the arrangements they planned? It didn't matter. It was theft, cloaked in the intimacy of marriage. Interactions with Bianca became performances. I played my part, the slightly preoccupied husband, perhaps a bit stressed from work. She didn't seem to notice the shift, or if she did, she likely attributed it to my usual quiet nature. Her own performance continued unabated. The affectionate touches that felt like ashes on my skin, the shared anecdotes about her day, which ones were real, the casual questions about mine. Each interaction felt like navigating a minefield, requiring constant vigilance to keep my expression neutral, my voice steady. One evening, she came up behind me while I was washing dishes, wrapping her arms around my waist, resting her head against my back. "Everything okay?" she murmured. "You've seemed distant lately." I stiffened, every muscle tensing. The warmth of her body felt alien, intrusive. I forced myself to relax, turning slightly. "Just work," I lied, the word tasting stale. "Got a difficult restoration project on my hands." It wasn't entirely untrue. The restoration of my own life felt impossibly complex. She accepted the explanation easily, perhaps relieved. She launched into a story about office politics, a drama involving colleagues I barely knew. I nodded along, my mind miles away, tracing the lines of deceit, remembering the mocking tone in her messages with R. She saw me as predictable, stable, perhaps even boring, an obstacle easily managed. The thought didn't even anger me anymore. It just solidified my resolve. The camphor wood chest remained at the foot of the bed, a silent monument to her betrayal. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I would look at it, knowing the bundle of letters rested inside, hidden beneath the false lining. They felt like unexploded ordnance, capable of immense destruction, yet contained. I had thought about removing them, photographing them, adding them to the growing file of evidence I was compiling. But leaving them there felt right, somehow. They were part of the chest's secret history now, intertwined with whatever stories it held before it came into my life. It was her secret, contained within the object she had desired for its hidden depths. One Saturday morning, Bianca announced she was going out for a long brunch with friends. "Just the girls," she said brightly, kissing my cheek before leaving. An hour later, driven by a cold compulsion I didn't bother to analyze, I checked the location tracker I'd discreetly enabled on her phone through our shared family account, a feature we'd set up for emergencies years ago and largely forgotten. She wasn't at the trendy brunch spot she'd mentioned. Her phone's blue dot glowed steadily from a residential address across town, an address I didn't recognize, but which matched a location mentioned frequently in her messages with R. His address, presumably. I closed the app, a cold wave washing over me, not of surprise but of confirmation. The sheer banality of the lie, the casual ease with which she perpetuated it, was almost stunning. There was no dramatic confrontation, no frantic chase across town. I simply noted the time, took a screenshot, and saved it to my secure file. Another piece of the map, another detail confirming the desolate landscape of our marriage. I went back to my workshop. The scent of old paper and binding glue was a comfort. I picked up a fine-tipped pen, leaning over a 17th-century map of the coastline of Italy, its edges frayed, its surface marked by time and tide. My work was to preserve, to mend, to make whole again what had been torn or faded. But some things, I realized, weren't meant to be restored. Some things were so fundamentally broken, built on such deep deception, that the only honest course was to acknowledge the ruin and walk away. I dipped the pen in ink, my hand perfectly steady as I drew a line, reconnecting a faded shore, making the unseen visible once more. The precision of the task was grounding. Bianca would come home later, smelling faintly of unfamiliar cologne masked by her usual perfume, full of bright chatter about brunch, oblivious. And I would listen, nod, add it to the tally. The end wasn't going to be explosive. It was going to be quiet, precise, a careful separation of boundaries, like surgically removing a diseased section from an otherwise valuable artifact. Lying in bed that night, the space beside me felt colder than ever. Bianca shifted, murmuring something unintelligible in her sleep. I looked at her profile in the faint moonlight, filtering through the blinds. The map of our life together was irrevocably altered, the familiar landmarks revealed as illusions. There was no path back to what we were. There was only the path forward, away from this intricate fabrication. My next step was clear. Tomorrow, I would call the first lawyer on my list. The restoration couldn't save the marriage, but perhaps it could save me. The cold clarity felt like the only truth left. Monday morning arrived with the gray, muted light of inevitability. While Bianca showered, humming a tune that grated on my nerves, I stepped out onto the back porch with my coffee, the burner phone feeling heavy and unfamiliar in my hand. I dialed the number for the first attorney on my list, a woman named Ms. Anya Sharma, noted for her discretion and sharp handling of complex asset divisions. Her assistant answered, professional and efficient. I gave my name, stated my need for a confidential consultation regarding a potential divorce, and an appointment was scheduled for later that week. Hanging up, a sense of cold relief washed over me, quickly followed by the chilling realization that this was real. The careful, internal mapping was now translating into tangible action. The first boundary line was being drawn. That evening, Bianca was particularly animated, talking about a potential promotion at her firm. She spoke of long-term goals, of finally being able to afford the bigger house she'd always dreamed of, maybe closer to the coast. "Imagine, Martin," she said, her eyes shining with an enthusiasm that felt utterly disconnected from our reality. "Weekend walks on the beach, just the two of us, like we always talked about." Just the two of us. The phrase hung in the air between us, thick with unspoken irony. I nodded, murmuring something non-committal, my mind replaying images from her hidden cloud storage, her laughing on a beach with R. This future she painted, this shared dream she invoked, was a fiction she was performing for my benefit, or perhaps even her own. Did she believe it herself? It hardly mattered anymore. Later, unable to sleep, I found myself in the quiet of my workshop. The moon cast long shadows across the floor. My tools lay neatly arranged on the bench. The half-finished map of Italy waited patiently under the lamp. I picked up a magnifying glass, examining the intricate details of the coastline near Venice, the delicate lines representing canals and lagoons. Restoration was about respecting the original structure, understanding its weaknesses, reinforcing it without erasing its history. But our marriage wasn't an antique map. It was a modern forgery, skillfully aged, designed to deceive. There was no original structure of truth left to restore. Trying to mend it would be like painting over dry rot. My gaze drifted towards the window, looking back at the dark house where Bianca slept, presumably dreaming of promotions and beach houses. The camphor wood chest stood silent sentinel in our bedroom, holding its secrets, hers and now mine. The anger was gone, replaced by a profound, almost detached clarity. There was no malice in my decision, no desire for revenge, just a need to separate, to cleanly excise the deception and salvage what remained of my own integrity. I thought of the lawyer's appointment later that week, the first step on a new, uncertain map. It wouldn't be easy. It would be painful, messy, complicated, but it was necessary. It was the only way forward. I looked down at the map again, at the firm, clear lines drawn by a steady hand centuries ago. Lines that defined edges, separated land from sea, marked boundaries. My own hand rested on the workbench. It was steady. It was time to draw mine.